Picture a snow-swept Kansas farm late at night with an unmarked helicopter sweeping in low and armed men battling federal agents in a swirl of gunfire. That's exactly the kind of chaos that unfolds in this riveting tale of a struggling widow who hoped to find a peaceful home for her grandchildren, only to uncover a trunk tied to century-old secrets that reach all the way to the Oval Office. This story blends heart-pounding action with deeply human moments of sacrifice, family bonds, and an unbreakable sense of duty. If you're curious about how everyday people can become unwitting protectors of our nation's clandestine past and the price they pay for standing in the gap, then you need to hear the entire saga. Don't miss the breathtaking conclusion where loyalty, courage, and fate all collide in a single snowy night. And while you're here, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any of our other powerful stories. Your support means the world and helps us bring you even more incredible tales. Charlotte Emerson sat hunched over the steering wheel of her old pickup truck, the icy Kansas wind rattling the doors as though begging her to give up and drive away. But she couldn't. Her two grandchildren, Daisy and Thomas, slept fitfully under a mountain of blankets on the truck's back seat, their breath fogging up the windows in gentle puffs. 50 years earlier, Charlotte had dreamed of a future bustling with love, success, and contentment. Now, at 67, she found herself widowed, nearly penniless, and clinging to a dog-eared flyer announcing the foreclosure auction of Pinecrest Farm. The bank's orange sign posted by the roadside proclaimed a desperate price slash the once thriving dairy farm was a ghost of itself, broken fences, a sagging barn roof, and rows of frozen fields that seemed to stretch into oblivion. She glanced at a small photograph taped to the dashboard, Richard, her late husband, in uniform. He had been a Vietnam veteran who returned from war, not quite whole, haunted by nightmares and secrets he refused to share. Charlotte loved him until his final breath, nursing him through the worst of his PTSD episodes and using whatever savings they had to keep the bills at bay. But after cancer claimed him 2 years ago, everything unraveled. Her grown daughter's tragic car accident left Charlotte as the sole guardian of Daisy and Thomas. It was in dire condition, the price dropping each week because local rumor claimed the land was cursed. Cursed or not, Charlotte muttered, it's all I can afford. The entire enterprise felt like standing on the edge of a cliff in a blizzard, not sure whether to step forward or turn back. Yet something tugged at her chest, the same feeling she used to get whenever Richard told her that life often had a funny way of steering you toward what you needed rather than what you wanted. The sun peeked over the horizon, revealing the tattered farmhouse at the end of a dirt lane, its paint peeled in patches and an ancient oak tree out front, bent in the winter wind like an old man bowing in defeat. In that moment, Charlotte resolved to believe that the farm was more than it seemed. She eased the pickup along the winding lane until she reached a small clearing where a single sign read, "Auction today, Pinecrest Farm." She woke Daisy and Thomas, hoping to muster a bright smile, but tears threatened to betray her. Today she had to muster every ounce of fortitude she had left. If she won the auction, it meant a ramshackle house, empty barns, uncertain water lines, and rumors of diseased livestock. Yet it also meant 4 solid walls land, to plant a garden and a chance, maybe the last chance, to keep her family together. She drew in a breath, feeling the sting of the cold air burn her lungs, and whispered a silent prayer. Richard had always believed in signs. Perhaps this place would be her sign that not all was lost. She pushed open the truck door, stepped onto the frozen gravel, and prepared to fight for her grandchildren's future, cursed farm or not. Then came the avalanche of debts, hospital bills, and threats from Child Protective Services. If Charlotte couldn't provide a stable home environment, they would place the kids in foster care. She could have moved into a cramped city shelter, but a part of her, a stubborn, determined part, refused to let that be her grandchildren's reality. Pinecrest Farm showed up on one of those last-chance real estate listings. Then came the avalanche of debts, hospital bills, and threats from Child Protective Services. If Charlotte couldn't provide a stable home environment, they would place the kids in foster care. She could have moved into a cramped city shelter, but a part of her, a stubborn, determined part, refused to let that be her grandchildren's reality. Pinecrest Farm showed up on one of those last-chance real estate listings. She had rehearsed this moment 100 times in her head. The bank's minimum bid stood at a figure barely within her reach if she liquidated everything, her meager inheritance from her mother Richard's small life insurance payout and the last bit of her retirement fund. She raised her hand, stammering out the initial bid. Immediately, a middle-aged farmer countered. The tall stranger in the suit took a sudden interest, scribbling notes, but not bidding yet. Dollar by dollar, the price crept upward. Charlotte's palms were slick with sweat, her worn sweater feeling too hot against her skin. Going once, going twice. The auctioneer's voice reverberated in her ears, just as she feared being outbid. The farmer bowed out, shaking his head. The tall stranger still hadn't raised his paddle, and Charlotte was half tempted to glance his way and challenge. But he remained eerily silent, letting the final gavel crash against the table. Sold. You do know what you're getting into, he said, more a statement than a question. Up close, Charlotte noticed a faint scar above his eyebrow and an official emblem on his briefcase that he tried to keep turned away. He tapped his pen anxiously. People say that land is trouble. I've heard the rumors, Charlotte replied, pressing the keys into her coat pocket. Bad water, disease, cattle. Maybe a curse, but it's a roof for my grandchildren. That's all that matters. The auctioneer announced, eyes flicking to Charlotte with a mixture of pity and curiosity. The final bid was still painfully high for her budget, but it was done. She officially owned Pinecrest Farm. A wave of relief and terror washed over her. She guided the kids forward, signing paperwork with trembling fingers, ignoring the congratulations that rang false in her ears. As soon as the clerk handed her the keys, the tall stranger approached. The main farmhouse stood in stoic silence, its shutters clinging precariously to rotted frames. The old barn to the left looked ready to cave in at the next strong gust of wind. Parking near the front porch, Charlotte noticed fresh footprints in the snow that didn't match her own boot size. Could be an old set of tracks, she reasoned, or perhaps the caretaker checking in. Still, it gave her an uneasy feeling reminiscent of the tension she felt near that stranger at the courthouse. Shaking it off, she trudged up the porch steps, each one creaking in protest, and inserted the key into the ancient lock. A sharp turning of the knob, and the front door groaned inward, releasing a stale wave of air that smelled of mold and damp wood. Inside, the living room displayed a bygone elegance, dusty floral wallpaper peeling at the corners, a grand stone fireplace blackened with soot and floors that squeaked in a sorrowful chorus. She set about opening windows, letting frigid winter air sweep through. Her gaze fell on a family portrait left behind, half shredded by water damage. A mother, father, and two smiling boys. No date, no names. Charlotte carefully placed it on the mantel, reeling with curiosity about who they were and why they had abandoned a house full of memories. She spent hours combing through each room, jotting down structural problems in a small notepad. The second floor had a leaky roof, the kitchen's wiring looked like a rat's nest, and the entire place seemed to hum with an odd undercurrent, like a low vibration in the walls. It reminded her of the feeling she got when she turned on her old radio to static. In the afternoon, she grabbed a flashlight from her truck and ventured into the basement. Beneath a rickety staircase, her boots crunched on loose gravel and debris, raising puffs of dust in the dim light. The basement was mostly empty, except for a rusted furnace and a cluster of old crates near the far wall. One crate in particular was almost disintegrated, and she nudged it aside to discover a wooden hatch underneath. The hatch had an iron ring handle and looked older than the rest of the house. Her heart quickened. Why would someone hide a hatch beneath crates in a basement? She tugged, and the hatch lifted with a groan of ancient wood, revealing a short stone staircase descending into darkness. The air below was colder still, tinged with an earthy scent like wet limestone. Every nerve in her body told her she was stumbling onto something significant. Maybe a root cellar or a long-forgotten storage room, yet a chill of apprehension coiled in her stomach. She had expected rotten boards and broken windows, not secret underground passages. Still, desperation and curiosity spurred her onward. She descended carefully, shining her flashlight to reveal walls of quarried stone, mortared together in a style reminiscent of the late 1800s. The passage was cramped, only wide enough for one person at a time, and the air smelled faintly of old lantern oil. After about a dozen steps, the tunnel opened into a small chamber. Charlotte's breath caught in her throat. The space felt deliberate. Not just a random cellar, something designed with intention. In the center, an iron-bound wooden trunk sat on a raised platform, its edges decorated with weather-worn insignias that resembled official crests. The thick padlock on the trunk looked antique but formidable. Around it lay scattered pages, some curled and yellowed, others eaten away by time. Carefully, Charlotte picked up a loose sheet that bore a flowing script. The ink faded but still legible. It read, by the authority of President A. Lincoln, to any rightful bearer or descendant who finds these documents. The rest of the line was obscured by water stains and mold, but that single reference to Lincoln made her pulse accelerate. President Abraham Lincoln. Her flashlight trembled in her hand. She set down the paper and with trembling fingers tried the trunk's lid. Locked tight, stunned by the presence of something so official, Charlotte stepped back to gather her thoughts. Could this be a hoax left by some local historian, or was she actually staring at century-and-a-half-old evidence? The date on the paper, if she squinted, appeared to be 1863. That was the height of the Civil War. She recalled half-forgotten stories Richard once mentioned about Pinkerton spies and Underground Railroad routes in Kansas. But that was the stuff of library archives, not a trunk in her new home. She fumbled through more papers, discovering references to coded communications route maps for runaway slaves and at least one letter bearing the name Pinkerton. A swirl of historical intrigue set her imagination ablaze. The discovered documents hinted that Pinecrest Farm might have once been a safe house or intelligence station that certainly beat the rumors of diseased cattle and a cursed well. Charlotte couldn't help but smile at the notion that maybe the curse was just local folklore to keep people away from something bigger. However, a shiver ran down her spine when she noticed a fresh set of footprints leading to and from the trunk, prints that looked too crisp to be decades old. Someone else had been here recently. Had they tried to break open the trunk? The padlock was scratched as though someone had taken tools to it. Suddenly, the footprints in the snow outside, the strange man at the courthouse, and the rummage basement all felt connected. Clutching the loose documents to her chest, Charlotte hurried back up the stone steps. She needed to figure out how to keep these materials safe, and more importantly, how to protect Daisy and Thomas. If whoever came prowling around discovered she had these documents, it might put them all in danger. She wasn't sure whether to call the local police. Small-town law enforcement might not be prepared for something with possible national ramifications. She emerged into the dusty basement, heart pounding. For the first time since signing those auction papers, she was genuinely afraid. Charlotte wasn't sure what to do with her new discovery. She placed the few loose documents she had gathered into a metal lockbox she found upstairs, then wedged it behind a stack of antique furniture in a back room. She tested her cell phone, only a faint signal. She tried calling her neighbor, Ms. Landers, who was watching Daisy and Thomas, but the line crackled. Eventually, she got through. "Everything okay?" Ms. Landers asked. "Yes, just a lot to sort out. I might be back later than planned. Keep the kids safe, all right?" Charlotte hung up, her mind swirling with questions she couldn't possibly answer alone. Should she contact a historian, the FBI, or the local news? The mention of President Lincoln seemed too big for local authorities to handle. Then again, the last thing she wanted was an influx of reporters trampling through the house, chasing sensational headlines. She decided to do some preliminary research on her own. For that, she needed an internet connection. Her phone was too spotty, so she drove into town and parked outside the public library, a red brick building with a statue of a Civil War soldier out front. Ironically enough, inside, the warmth and the smell of old books welcomed her. She settled at a public computer terminal, typed Lincoln, Pinkerton, Kansas Civil War hidden intelligence, and waited to see what came up. Page after page of historical references popped up. Allen Pinkerton was Lincoln's chief of intelligence during the Civil War, known for uncovering plots to assassinate the president. There were documented safe houses in Kansas that aided the Underground Railroad, some even rumored to have hidden compartments and advanced technology for the time. But Pinecrest Farm wasn't specifically mentioned. She drilled deeper, scanning obscure historical forums. One comment thread mentioned a clandestine site in Wilson County, rumored to have been both an abolitionist refuge and, decades later, a Cold War listening post. Charlotte felt a twinge of validation. Her farm might indeed be that location. The local historian's archive included references to confiscated documents that had vanished from public record in the 1960s. The puzzle pieces were aligning uncomfortably well. She also stumbled upon some modern references, hush-hush talk about black helicopters and unmarked vehicles seen near the area. A few conspiracy-leaning forum posts claimed the land was rigged with electromagnetic anomalies. For a moment, she wondered if she was diving into lunacy. Could there really be a through line from the Civil War, through the Cold War, up to modern times, all converging on Pinecrest Farm? Before she could glean much more, the library lights flickered. The storm outside must have been intensifying. She logged off and slipped out, hugging her coat close against the cold. Outside, she couldn't shake the feeling she was being watched. Every black SUV passing by made her stomach knot. When Charlotte returned to her pickup, she found a folded note under the windshield wiper. No footprints in the fresh snow, but the note was definitely placed recently. It read in tidy handwriting. "We know what you found. Keep it quiet if you value your safety and theirs." There was no signature, no contact number. The warning was clear enough. She tore the note to pieces, hands trembling, and drove back to Pinecrest Farm determined to protect her grandchildren at all costs, even if it meant facing whatever hidden powers were at play. That evening, Charlotte made a firm decision she would bring Daisy and Thomas to the farm. If danger lurked in the shadows, she wanted her family together, where she could watch over them. Splitting them up no longer felt safe. Not after that threatening note. She retrieved the children from Miss Landers and drove back in silence. The kids, sensing her mood, huddled together in the back seat. The farmhouse was dimly lit by a single lamp Charlotte had hauled in. She set the kids up in the living room with blankets, a space heater, and snacks. Despite the cold and the lingering dust, the children seemed relieved to be with their grandmother. Daisy, who was 10, tried to brighten the mood by humming a Christmas tune, even though it was still weeks away. Thomas, 8, quietly fiddled with a small puzzle cube, his brows knitted in concentration. After dinner, a simple meal of canned soup and crackers, Charlotte decided to tell them a gentle version of what was going on. "We might have found something special here, something historical." She began forcing calmness into her voice. "Grandma's going to figure out how to keep it safe, but until then, we all need to be very cautious. If strangers come by, you tell me right away. Don't wander off alone and stay close to the house, all right?" Both children nodded solemnly. "Is it like treasure?" Thomas asked, a flicker of excitement in his eyes. Maybe, Charlotte allowed, although the word treasure didn't capture the gravity of national intelligence from the 1800s. She added, "It's important enough that some people might want to take it by force, so we have to watch out for each other." A sudden knock at the front door jarred them all. Charlotte froze, heart pounding. She motioned for the kids to stay put and approached the door, slowly looking through the peephole. To her surprise, she recognized the broad shoulders and silver hair of the man standing on the porch. It was Pastor Will Bancroft from the local Methodist church. He had a lantern in one hand and a kind but anxious expression. "Mrs. Emerson," Pastor Will asked through the door. "I saw your truck lights. Heard you'd won the auction. Just wanted to check in and see if y'all needed any help." Relief and suspicion warred within Charlotte. She opened the door slightly, letting the wind whip at her ankles. "That's very generous, Pastor. We're settling in." "Pastor," Will offered an avuncular grin, "this place has quite a history. Folks say it's cursed, but I believe any house can be made a home with enough love." He set down a small basket of cookies. "If you need anything, firewood help patching the roof, just call." She thanked him and watched as he trudged back to his truck. On the one hand, it was comforting to see a friendly face. On the other, Charlotte couldn't deny a spike of paranoia. Everyone in this town seemed to know Pinecrest Farm had secrets, but how many of them truly understood what lay beneath the floors? Before returning inside, she peered around. No other vehicles, no suspicious silhouettes. Perhaps it was just neighborly kindness. When she returned to the living room, Daisy and Thomas were already dozing off. Charlotte sat beside them, stirring her thoughts like a storm in her head. If the trunk belonged to some classified ring of intelligence, wouldn't the government come knocking soon? She remembered the near obsession Richard had with loyalty and patriotism after his return from Vietnam. How he'd insisted that some duties to the country remain secret. Perhaps Charlotte thought this was her moment to uphold a family tradition of service, even if it came out of nowhere. She glanced at Daisy and Thomas, their young faces tinted by the lamp's glow, and whispered, "No matter what happens, I won't let anyone take you from me." Early the next morning, Charlotte awoke to a startling sound, a helicopter's roar overhead. She rushed to the window, heart in her throat, imagining black-clad men rappelling from the sky. But as she peered out, she saw nothing, just the gray dawn light. Daisy and Thomas stirred awake, blinking in confusion. She was about to dismiss it as a passing aircraft when the rumble returned closer this time. With cautious steps, Charlotte made her way outside. The wind whipped at her robe and she squinted against the dimness. A dark helicopter circled overhead, then drifted away toward the horizon. No identifiable markings were visible. She felt goosebumps rise along her arms. Perhaps it was just a coincidence. Maybe it was a medical chopper or an agricultural survey, but the timing right after she discovered those papers felt too conspicuous. Returning inside, she found her grandchildren staring wide-eyed at her. "It's okay," she said, forcing a calm smile. "Just a helicopter passing by." But her mind was already racing. She needed to protect the trunk's contents. Locking them in a dusty room wasn't going to cut it. After a quick breakfast, she guided the children outside, showing them the fields and the dilapidated barn from a safe distance. They needed to acclimate to their new home. Yes, but she also wanted to see if there were fresh footprints again. Sure enough, near the back of the house, she spotted faint tracks in the snow heading around to the cellar door. It looked like only one person. Smaller footprints, possibly a woman's or a short man's. The prints vanished at the corner of the house where the snow had drifted. Charlotte's nerves crackled. She had no idea who was skulking around or what they wanted. Approaching the cellar, she found a broken padlock lying on the ground. The hasp snapped. She cursed under her breath. Someone had definitely tried to get inside. Racing down the cellar steps, she tested the hidden hatch. Thankfully, it remained locked from the inside and the trunk below was still sealed. But for how long? She ushered Daisy and Thomas back into the house, scanning the horizon for any sign of watchers. The phone signal inside the farmhouse was still weak, but she managed a brief call to Pastor Will, asking if he could recommend a good locksmith and possibly a handyman. She told him about the broken lock without divulging too much detail. "I'll see who I can rustle up," he said, concern evident in his voice. Less than an hour later, a local handyman named Gus Wilcox arrived with a heavy toolbox and a resolute demeanor. He replaced the cellar's padlock and reinforced the door. "You living alone out here with those kids?" Gus asked, glancing around the creaking interior. "Yes, my grandchildren," Charlotte replied tersely. She offered no further explanation and Gus didn't pry. His weathered face showed sympathy. "If you need help with anything else, just holler," he said, tipping his cap. That afternoon, while the kids napped, Charlotte gathered the few Civil War-era documents she'd salvaged and placed them in a sealed plastic bag. She typed up a short note to accompany them. "I have significant historical materials that may pertain to national security. Please advise." She addressed it to the FBI's office in Topeka, though she had no direct contact name. It felt like a long shot, but she hoped maybe the Bureau's historical unit, if such a thing existed, would know what to do. 2 days passed with an eerie calm, broken only by the occasional low pass of that ominous helicopter. Charlotte busied herself cleaning the house, patching leaks and setting up living quarters. The children helped where they could, especially Daisy, who took pride in learning how to sweep out cobwebs and scrub windows. Thomas wandered the property in search of squirrels and birds, brimming with curiosity about farm life. Late on a Saturday afternoon, just as the winter sun began its retreat, a black SUV rolled up the lane. Charlotte felt her stomach clench. She stepped onto the porch, arms crossed protectively. A tall woman in her late 50s emerged wearing a dark overcoat and matching gloves. Her hair was short gray around the temples. She approached slowly, hands visible. "Mrs. Emerson," the woman asked in a calm, authoritative voice. "I'm Margaret Collins with the Federal Bureau of Investigation." She flashed a badge. "We received your note and the documents you sent." Charlotte inhaled sharply. She hadn't expected such a prompt visit, nor such a high-level response. "I didn't think someone would come so soon," she murmured, trying to keep her composure. Collins gave a tight smile. "We take Civil War intelligence matters quite seriously, especially when it references individuals like President Lincoln and Alan Pinkerton. May I come inside?" After a moment's hesitation, Charlotte gestured for the woman to enter. Daisy and Thomas peered from behind the living room doorway. Charlotte introduced them, noticing the flicker of softness in Collins's otherwise stern gaze. "You've got brave grandchildren," Collins remarked quietly, as though acknowledging the precariousness of their living situation. They settled around the creaky dining room table. With surprising candor, Collins explained that certain historical documents from the Pinkerton era had never been fully disclosed. "There's a reason we're the Federal Bureau of Investigation," she said. One of our forerunners was the Department of Justice's investigative division, which had roots in Pinkerton's methods. If you've stumbled upon a trunk or letters that were meant to remain hidden, it could have legal or security implications even now. Charlotte's pulse raced. I found more than just old letters. There's a trunk in a sub-basement locked with a big padlock. She paused, choosing her words carefully. I think someone's been trying to steal it, or at least tamper with it. Collins's expression turned grave. She leaned forward. This farm has a known history among certain circles, though it's never been publicly confirmed. Rumor is the property was used intermittently as a covert listening post during the Cold War, employing electromagnetic anomalies in the soil for advanced radio interception. If your trunk is from that era or earlier, it might tie up loose ends in older intelligence operations. Why me? Charlotte asked, voice trembling. I'm just a widow, trying to keep custody of my grandkids. Collins's gaze flicked to the children again. Sometimes fate picks ordinary people for extraordinary tasks. I'm here to see if you're willing to cooperate with us. We can protect you, but we also need to ensure these documents don't fall into the wrong hands. Charlotte swallowed hard, recalling the threatening note in the footprints in the snow. She looked at Daisy and Thomas, who stared back, worried yet trusting. Every motherly instinct told her to shield them from further danger, but running away wasn't an option. This farm was supposed to be their safe haven. If working with the FBI is the only way to keep them safe, she said, voice steadying, then I'm willing. Under the fading orange glow of the late afternoon sun, Charlotte led Agent Collins down into the basement and then through the hidden hatch into the smaller subterranean chamber. Daisy and Thomas, filled with a mixture of excitement and anxiety, insisted on coming along, though Charlotte made them stay at the chamber's entrance. The trunk loomed in the flickering beam of Collins's heavy-duty flashlight. She approached it with irreverent caution, as though it might explode if mishandled. Collins ran her gloved fingers along the rusted metal reinforcements. This style of trunk was common in the mid-1800s, though it's been reinforced with an early form of steel plating. See those rivets? They look more modern than Civil War era, possibly updated in the 20th century. She knelt down, examining the lock. This padlock, however, looks much older. Charlotte held her breath, half expecting the trunk to resist any attempts at opening. Collins produced a small kit from her bag lock, picks a small camera, and what appeared to be a portable X-ray device. Charlotte marveled at the sophisticated gear. She watched the children, noticing that even they seemed enthralled by the hush of the moment. After several tense minutes, Collins pried the lock open. Inside the trunk lay a trove of documents sealed in protective sleeves, some parchment, some typed pages on onion skin paper, even a small reel of what looked like microfilm. Carefully stacked on top was a single folded sheet with a distinctive red wax seal. Collins slipped it out of her face, unreadable. She muttered, "Incredible," then snapped a picture. Turning to Charlotte, she said, "It's an original letter bearing President Lincoln's signature, granting Pinkerton's agents broad authority to operate secret safe houses across various states. Mentions of coded routes and future expansions." She paused, scanning further. It references not just the Civil War, but also instructions for a future generation to guard hidden knowledge. An electric tingle ran through Charlotte's arms. So it was meant to be found by someone beyond their time. She asked. Collins nodded slowly, flipping through several more documents. Yes, and look at this. There's correspondence from the 1950s referencing government labs in New Mexico. Hush-hush Cold War operations. It's as if the trunk was updated across different eras of American intelligence. Daisy and Thomas exchanged wide-eyed glances. Charlotte wondered if they grasped the gravity of it all, how this find connected them to 150 years of secret national history. Collins replaced the documents carefully. These materials could rewrite chapters of American spycraft history. We must handle them with absolute care. Just then, a loud thump echoed from the top of the basement stairs. Charlotte jumped, nearly dropping her flashlight. Collins motioned for them to stay put, then crept up the steps, sidearm drawn. The children clutched Charlotte's arm, hearts pounding. Moments later, Collins returned, exhaling false alarm. A shelf in the kitchen collapsed under its own weight. Nevertheless, the jolt underscored how precarious their situation was. "We need a strategy." Collins said, "I'll call in a secure transport team to move these documents to a safer location." But that means your property will be under federal surveillance for a while. She looked at Charlotte meaningfully. There's also the matter of your custody situation. Given the sensitivity here, we can ensure certain protections for your family, but we need your full cooperation. Charlotte inhaled shakily, mind swimming with the sudden shift in her fortunes. A few months ago, she was on the verge of homelessness. Now her dilapidated farm was the focal point of an FBI operation. Spanning centuries, Daisy and Thomas gazed up at her, their eyes reflecting both fear and hope. She squeezed their shoulders, turning back to Collins. "Do what you must," she said. "I'll do whatever it takes to keep these children safe and see this through." Early the next morning, a pair of unmarked black SUVs pulled up alongside the house, followed shortly by a large box truck. Out stepped a small team of federal agents in civilian clothes, each moving with purposeful efficiency. They introduced themselves only by first names, Greg, Tanya, Micah, and Rose, and began setting up a perimeter under Agent Collins' direction. They quickly transformed the farmhouse into a makeshift command post, installing radio equipment in the living room and using the kitchen table as a staging area for documents. Daisy and Thomas watched with rapt fascination, while Charlotte felt her nerves on a razor's edge. The kids needed to keep up with their schoolwork would Child Protective Services come knocking if they got wind of this chaos. To her surprise, Collins pulled Charlotte aside and explained that the FBI could provide certain cover stories if local authorities grew suspicious. "We'll let them think we're historical preservation experts from the National Archives." Collins said it's not entirely untrue. "We are preserving important documents, just also handling national security." Word spread through the small county fast. By mid-afternoon, Pastor Will and a few curious neighbors arrived bearing casseroles and pies, wanting to know if the big truck signaled construction or some sort of salvage operation. "Heard you're working on preserving old artifacts," the pastor said. "Maybe this is the start of a museum." Charlotte nodded vaguely, letting Collins do most of the talking. "We found some historical materials in the basement," the FBI agent said, offering a courteous but non-specific explanation. "They need special handling, and we appreciate the community's support." By evening, the trunk and its documents were carefully transported from the hidden chamber to a locked vault inside the box truck. The plan was to transfer them to a secure FBI facility within 48 hours. However, as a temporary measure, the documents remained on Charlotte's property under constant guard. The presence of armed federal agents around her house felt surreal, and she caught glimpses of Daisy and Thomas looking both thrilled and frightened by the tension. During dinner, Charlotte invited Collins and a couple of the agents to share a simple meal of roast chicken and vegetables. Over plates balanced on laps, the conversation turned to what these documents might imply for American history. "Pinkerton was known for saving Lincoln from an early assassination attempt," Micah said. "But I've never heard anything about an ongoing network." Post-Civil War, Collins nodded. "If these letters are genuine, and so far every test indicates they are, it suggests Pinkerton's intelligence network adapted through World War I, World War II, and even the Cold War. It may have used places like Pinecrest Farm as a vantage point, harnessing natural electromagnetic anomalies to intercept signals. We knew Kansas farmland was suspected in some intelligence lore, but we didn't have confirmation until now." Charlotte's head spun at the thought, the weight of history pressed on her shoulders. "Does that mean we're in danger from foreign spies, or even domestic forces who don't want the truth out?" Collins exchanged a glance with the other agents. "Potentially. We're monitoring that possibility. Our biggest threat might be private interest groups hoping to sell or exploit these secrets. We must remain vigilant." Night fell and a hush settled over the farmhouse. The agents rotated in shifts patrolling the perimeter. Daisy and Thomas lay asleep in a makeshift bedroom that Charlotte had arranged, lulled into slumber by the quiet hum of the generator, powering extra heaters. Charlotte, too anxious to sleep, sat near the window, with a cup of tea watching moonlight cast long shadows across the fields. Around midnight, a single sharp bark came from one of the agents' radios. Movement near the north fence line. Charlotte's heart lurched. She carefully peered outside, but the darkness was impenetrable beyond the yard light's feeble glow. Moments later, a brief flurry of soft footsteps muffled shouts and the rustling of something heavy. Then silence. Charlotte crept to the back door. She found the agent named Tanya there, breathing hard, gun in hand. Tanya beckoned for Charlotte to stay back as she spoke quietly into her radio. "We've secured an intruder. Seems to be alone. Possibly armed alone." Charlotte's stomach twisted. She wanted to see who it was, but Collins appeared and gently guided her toward the living room. "Stay with the children," the FBI agent said, her face set in a grim line. Unable to fully comply, Charlotte hovered in the hallway, hearing bits and pieces of urgent radio chatter. She caught the words, "Female suspect trespassing, refused to give ID and scout." At length the door opened, and two agents escorted a woman in dark clothing, hands zip-tied behind her back. Her eyes flicked about, calculating an escape, but the agents maintained a firm hold. Before Charlotte could approach the woman, locked eyes with her, there was something oddly familiar about the face, maybe the shape of the jaw or the intense stare. As the agents whisked the intruder into a side room for questioning, Charlotte's mind reeled. Who was she, and what was she after? Unable to bear the suspense, Charlotte snuck closer to the door, eavesdropping on the hushed interrogation. The intruder offered no name, no explanation beyond cryptic references to the trunk. She demanded a lawyer or at least a phone call citing some vague official capacity. Collins asked, "Are you working for a private security firm?" "A foreign government?" The woman answered only with a sneer. Finally, the door opened, and Collins noticed Charlotte lingering. The agent's gaze softened. "She's not cooperating, claims she works for a historical research consortium, but her ID is fake. We suspect she's been hired by someone else to retrieve or sabotage the documents." Charlotte's frustration bubbled. Why does everyone want these documents? They're old intel. How can they still matter? Collins explained patiently. Certain lines of continuity and intelligence. If Pinkerton's network was never officially decommissioned, it could hold embarrassing truths about operations that continued illegally. For some, that's a gold mine. For others, it's a legal nightmare. Shaken, Charlotte returned to her vigil by the children. She tucked a blanket around their small forms and glanced at the cluttered living room, now stacked with government equipment. She recalled a time not so long ago when her biggest worry was paying the electric bill. Now her life was a swirl of hidden compartments, intruders in the night, and century-spanning conspiracies. She stroked Daisy's hair, wishing fervently for normalcy, but realizing that normal had left the building the moment she found the trunk in her basement. By dawn, the dusting of snow outside glimmered under a pale sun. The intruder had been driven off-site by two agents, presumably to an FBI holding facility. Collins and her team were packing up the trunk and its contents into the box truck, preparing for immediate transport to a more secure location. The tension was palpable. A sense of both relief and dread loomed: relief that the documents would be safer somewhere else, and dread that Charlotte and her grandchildren would remain in the crosshairs for those who believed secrets still lurked on the farm. Over coffee in the kitchen, Collins delivered a startling proposal. "Mrs. Emerson, you have a choice. We can relocate you and the children into a witness protection program temporarily, or we can station some agents here until the dust settles. We've discovered that the entire farm may be more integral to these old operations than we realize. There might be additional hidden compartments or technology integrated in ways we've never seen. We can't force you to stay, but if you do, it could help us uncover the full scope of Pinecrest Farm's past. In return, we'd ensure you have the financial and structural support to fix the place up." Charlotte's first instinct was to run. After all, her only intention had been to provide a stable life for Daisy and Thomas. Yet something about Collins's words piqued her curiosity. She thought of Richard, how he used to talk about serving the country in ways large or small, how duty could appear in surprising forms. As much as Charlotte feared for her family's safety, part of her wanted to see through whatever grand puzzle her farm was a piece of. She looked at Daisy and Thomas sitting at the rickety table with the half-eaten plates of eggs and toast. A shy hope flickered in their eyes. They liked the farm, cursed or not. "If I move them again," Charlotte reasoned silently, "it might break their spirits. I need time to think," she told Collins. "This is so much bigger than me. But running might not be the best answer. If the farm itself is the key, I want to know why. And I want to protect that knowledge from people who intend harm." Collins gave an understanding nod. "Take your time, but I must warn you, threats will persist. We've already confirmed suspicious activity from at least one unknown group. The farm's rumored electromagnetic anomalies might have modern implications like advanced surveillance or jamming. That's worth a fortune to the wrong people." While Collins supervised the loading of the trunk, Charlotte took Daisy and Thomas on a walk around the property's perimeter. The air was crisp and bracing. Thin rays of sun danced on patches of snow. The kids laughed at frosted footprints, turning the solemn surroundings into a sort of magical adventure. It struck Charlotte that they deserved this sense of wonder, this chance to grow up somewhere quiet, even if it wasn't as safe as she once thought. Mid-walk, they stumbled upon a collapsed wooden structure near the far edge of the property. It had looked like an old storage shed, half sunken into the earth. Curiosity piqued, Charlotte moved closer. She noticed twisted metal beams and a scattering of antique radio components strewn about. Something about the configuration felt strategic, not random. A gust of wind made the beams clink like ghostly wind chimes. Shivering, she led the kids back, her mind abuzz with more questions. By the time they returned to the house, the box truck was gone, headed to an undisclosed federal location with the trunk locked inside. One agent, Greg, remained behind to maintain a basic watch and relay messages to Collins. Charlotte eyed the half-empty living room, feeling an odd mixture of loss and relief. The trunk was gone, but the land still held secrets and perhaps a destiny for her family she never could have predicted. The days that followed brought a strange new normal. Agent Greg stayed in a small RV parked near the barn, giving Charlotte and the children some semblance of privacy while still maintaining a protective eye. The FBI arranged for a local contractor to assess the farmhouse's structural issues and begin essential repairs. The sudden improvements led to rampant speculation among the townsfolk. Was Charlotte preparing to open a bed and breakfast, or had she come into a secret inheritance? Pastor Will stopped by, more often offering moral support and inviting them to church socials. While Charlotte appreciated his kindness, she was cautious about revealing too much. She stuck to the official line about historical restoration, though she suspected he guessed there was more to the story. One crisp afternoon, Collins returned with two specialized investigators, one a military engineer named Captain Ruth Delgado, the other a historian named Dr. Jameson Burke. Together, they scoured the property for hidden compartments and unusual electromagnetic readings. Daisy and Thomas followed them, excitedly peppering them with questions. Burke, an older man with a gentle smile, seemed especially charmed by the children's curiosity. When they reached the collapsed shed, where Charlotte had found old radio parts, Delgado began taking readings with a handheld device. Her face grew increasingly puzzled. "I'm picking up residual electromagnetic fields," she said, like something was generating or amplifying signals here. "But this gear is from the 1950s at the latest. Even so, the ground beneath seems to be unusual." She set aside the meter and pried away some rotted planks, revealing an underground metal grate. "Doctor." Burke's eyes widened. "It's a mini-subterranean vault, looks welded shut from above, possibly a Cold War-era communication hub." Delgado nodded in agreement. "We'll need heavy equipment to open it safely." Charlotte stood by, feeling a sense of awe. So the farm wasn't just a Civil War safe house. It might have been a Cold War listening post, too. Collins offered a small smile. "Indeed, it seems Pinecrest Farm was repurposed across multiple eras. If this vault is intact, we might find radio logs, intelligence documents, maybe more advanced prototypes. It could fill in decades of missing records." By dusk, a crane truck arrived, courtesy of the FBI's discreet contracting. The children watched enthralled as Delgado supervised the careful removal of debris. Charlotte's anxiety soared with each clang of metal. She half expected a booby trap or hidden explosives, but after hours of painstaking work, they finally pried open the vault door. A waft of stale, chemical-laden air emerged, causing everyone to recoil. Inside, they discovered a cramped compartment lined with metal shelves, rusted canisters, water-damaged boxes, and a dusty console of dials and switches dominated the space. Delgado's flashlight revealed a tangle of wires running into the ground. "It looks like a direct feed for intercepting signals," she said, voice hushed in wonder. "Doctor." Burke, stepping, gingerly retrieved a metal canister labeled Project Overlook 1962. Inside were more microfilms and type reports referencing infiltration concerns with Soviet satellites. Charlotte couldn't help but notice the date preceded the Cuban Missile Crisis, implying clandestine knowledge. As the final bits of debris were cleared, Charlotte felt an odd pride in her failing farm. Cursed or not, it had served as a silent sentinel for generations, harboring secrets vital to American history. Yet her heart also clenched at the enormity of it all. This land, which she bought simply to keep her grandchildren under one roof, carried a weight far heavier than she ever imagined. For the first time, she found herself hoping that by unearthing these secrets, she could serve her country just as Richard once did and carve out a future worthy of Daisy and Thomas's dreams. In the ensuing weeks, Pinecrest Farm transformed into a hub of carefully orchestrated activity. Local rumors flew wild. Some townspeople believed Hollywood was filming a top-secret movie. Others spun yarns of alien technology or haunted Civil War ghosts. Charlotte let them whisper, only reaffirming that the farm was under renovation. The clandestine reality was far more impressive. A rotating team of FBI and military experts cataloged every artifact from the newly uncovered vault. They found half-burned files referencing covert missions, prototype radio equipment decades ahead of his time, and diaries from unnamed agents who had lived on site for months at a time, monitoring transmissions from thousands of miles away. Each discovery wove a deeper tapestry tying Pinecrest Farm to pivotal moments in American history. Meanwhile, Charlotte juggled the demands of everyday life, contacting Child Protective Services to assure them the children were safe, scheduling Daisy and Thomas for local homeschooling. Agent Greg vouched as a family friend and attending to the simpler joys of living on a farm. She taught the kids how to plant winter-friendly herbs in a small greenhouse corner, let them feed scattered birds in the yard, and encouraged them to keep journals of their experiences. The stress of living amid constant government presence weighed on her at times. At night, she would step onto the porch with a blanket around her shoulders, gazing over the moonlit fields that once seemed so foreboding. Now they shimmered with the promise of renewal. The improvements funded by the FBI arrangement were becoming evident: repaired barn roofs, new wiring in the house, even a trickle of clean water from an updated well. It felt as though Pinecrest Farm was rising from the ashes, becoming something both historically significant and personally redemptive. Agent Collins, who had proven to be more ally than distant bureaucrat, grew increasingly open with Charlotte. One evening, the two women shared a pot of strong tea in the living room. The conversation drifted to deeper topics: family sacrifice and duty. Collins revealed she'd lost her own father, a Vietnam vet, to illness years ago. She understood the heartbreak of caring for someone whose burdens were partly invisible. "You're doing more than preserving documents," Collins said. "You're showing us how much we owe to those who kept the nation safe from the shadows. Pinkerton's men, the unknown Cold War watchers. They all risked their lives in clandestine ways. In some sense, you're finishing what they started." Charlotte absorbed those words, feeling a warmth in her chest. She remembered how, as a newlywed, she once told Richard she would follow him to the ends of the earth if it meant giving him peace after the nightmares of war. Now, in a strange twist, she was following a path of secrets that stretched across centuries. Perhaps that was her own brand of service, her own testament to love, for her grandchildren, for her late husband, and for a country grappling with the weight of its untold stories. Despite the profound sense of purpose, Charlotte knew danger still lurked. She never forgot the intruder, nor the suspicious helicopter sightings. More than once, Greg reported fresh footprints near the north fence. Whoever wanted these secrets wasn't finished, but for the moment, a quiet calm settled over the farm, an interlude of discovery and cautious hope. Charlotte allowed herself just once to believe that maybe, just maybe, everything would turn out all right. That belief was tested on a frosty winter night, weeks after the vault excavation. Snowdrifts blanketed the fields, the moon obscured by thick clouds. Charlotte was tucking Daisy and Thomas into bed when a frantic call came through Greg's radio perimeter breach. Multiple tangos. Lights in the yard sparked awake, painting the snow in cold, fluorescent brilliance. Voices shouted commands, and the distant bark of gunfire made Charlotte's blood run cold. She pressed the children back, urging them to remain silent, and slipped into the hallway. Collins and Delgado raced past, exchanging curt orders. Charlotte stood by the staircase, trembling, unsure if she should hide with the children or attempt to help. Then she saw something that spurred her into action. Daisy had crept downstairs, eyes full of tears, searching for her grandmother. Without hesitation, Charlotte darted forward to scoop her up. Outside, the snowfall and darkness provided cover for at least 3 intruders. They wore black tactical gear, faces concealed by scarves. One agent was down near the barn, though Greg knelt beside him, returning fire in controlled bursts. The men advanced toward the house, obviously determined to breach it. Inside, Delgado rummaged for riot shields and Collins scanned camera feeds from hastily installed security monitors. "They're after the hidden archives we found," she said, jaw tight. "They must think we're storing them here." Heart-hammering, Charlotte ushered the children into a windowless pantry, instructing them to stay quiet. She snatched up a fire poker, an absurd weapon against armed intruders, but fear galvanized her. She recalled Richard's advice on how to remain calm under duress. Taking a shaky breath, she forced herself to focus amid the whirling snow and staccato gunfire. Delgado and Collins coordinated a defense. From the cameras, Charlotte saw the intruders place some device near the old shed, likely an attempt to bypass or disrupt the electromagnetic field. Sparks flew and the yard lights flickered ominously. Collins barked, "They're trying to short-circuit our perimeter. We need to push them back now." Summoning courage, Charlotte crept onto the porch, hoping a single grandmother's silhouette might confuse them. One of the intruders turned startled by her sudden appearance. For a split second, nobody moved. Then in an explosion of sound, Greg darted around the corner, tackling the intruder to the ground. Another attacker dove behind a snowdrift, returning fire. Charlotte dropped, low arms shaking violently, her breath ragged with terror. The skirmish lasted mere minutes but felt like an eternity. Eventually, the intruders were subdued. Two captured, one fleeing into the night. Collins's team sustained minor injuries, but no fatalities. Thomas and Daisy, cowering in the pantry, emerged unhurt. When Charlotte finally sank into a chair, tears streamed unchecked down her face. The illusions of safety had shattered. The secrets of Pinecrest Farm were still a potent lure for those willing to kill. Yet in that moment, Charlotte found clarity. She looked at the bullet-riddled barn, the swirl of red and blue emergency lights arriving from the county sheriff's office, and the exhausted but resolute faces of Collins and Delgado. These men and women had risked their lives to protect a legacy of hidden knowledge. Charlotte realized she was no bystander. She was caretaker of this land's secrets, past, present, and future. Cursed or not, Pinecrest Farm was now her family's home and her responsibility. If she had to stand guard at the threshold between darkness and history, she would. Because for Daisy and Thomas, and for every chapter in America's unfolding story, some truths deserve to be protected even if it meant sacrificing the simple life she once knew. The night's chill burned her lungs, but her heart burned hotter with resolve. In the turmoil's aftermath, Charlotte understood that this was only the beginning. The trunk's revelations had ignited a chain reaction of discoveries. There would be more challenges ahead, more adversaries lurking, but she wouldn't run. By the first light of dawn, with Daisy and Thomas huddled close, she whispered a quiet promise into the fading starlight. "We stay, we fight, we protect what's ours and what belongs to history." In that solemn vow, the spirit of Pinecrest Farm, its centuries of hidden guardianship, found its newest champion. Looking back on everything, I'm reminded that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the quiet resolve to protect your own, despite impossible odds. Our widow's journey, starting from the brink of financial ruin to holding the keys of national history in her trembling hands, proves that destiny can surprise you at any age. She's no trained soldier, but her unshakable love for her family and this country makes her every bit a guardian of secrets once buried. Now the farm stands as more than a refuge. It's a living chapter in America's story, passed from generation to generation, through ordinary people called to do extraordinary things. I'd love to know what you think. Was there a moment that captured your heart or made you gasp? Leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Let's keep the conversation going and explore the lasting power of courage, family, and honor in the face of hidden truths.